Once again, more Americans than ever are renouncing U.S. citizenship. And that's even at a time when, thanks to the pandemic, U.S. embassies around the world are in many cases not even accepting renunciation appointments. Waitlists are growing, and you're going to see a big trend coming in the next year or two as more Americans head for the exits. But there's one particular former American who's a billionaire and landed himself in potentially some hot water that offers some lessons on what not to do when you're planning on renouncing your citizenship. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. I'm the author of this best-selling book and the founder of Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure and sometimes even 9- and 10-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. Now, as always, when we come to issues of people who get themselves in hot water, I remind you that I am the goody two-shoes of the offshore business. I suggest that you play by the rules, follow the rules, play it straight. And so it is with that sentiment that I bring you an article from International Investment, which tells the story of Oleg Tinkov, the Russian billionaire charged with tax fraud. The article begins that Russian billionaire Oleg Tinkov has been formally charged with tax fraud for allegedly filing false tax returns. Tinkoff stands accused of concealing $1 billion in assets and income from the U.S. tax authorities at the time when he renounced his U.S. citizenship in 2013. Which required him to report his assets following a stock market flotation in London, the Department of Justice said. So, when you renounce your U.S. citizenship, you are subject to an exit tax. And so, if you have a net worth of $2 million, if you paid a healthy amount, not for a billionaire, but a healthy amount for a normal person, a federal income tax, or if you were not in tax compliance at the time of your expatriation, you will be liable for an exit tax. And they basically add up all the value of your assets on the day before your last appointment, and they say, okay, what is this stuff worth, mark-to-market value? Certainly, you're allowed to have differences of opinion. You're allowed to take a position that, okay, this is worth this, and that's not worth that. And you get to say, hey, here's what this is worth, but you have to have a fair market valuation of your assets. And the Justice Department in the Oleg Tinkov case said that just didn't happen. Oleg Tinkov was arrested in London on a provisional warrant at the request of the U.S. on charges brought by prosecutors for the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of California. Well, again, you live in California, you get what you get. You should never live in California if you're trying to pay less tax. The 52-year-old Russian billionaire first appeared in Westminster Magistrates Court last week, accused by the U.S. IRS of filing a false tax return in 2013 when he allegedly underreported his income as a U.S. citizen. The hearing is expected to last until April. This is not a news story, by the way, but it's a story that I've been watching and been curious about. Tinkoff posted a £20 million bail to be allowed to stay in his apartment in central London, respect to curfew, stay within the M25 motorway, hand over his passports. The prosecutors said in a statement announcing the indictment, Tinkoff's decision to renounce his U.S. citizenship was a taxable event, requiring him to report to the IRS the constructive sale of his worldwide assets, report the gain of the constructive sale of his assets to the IRS, and pay tax on such gain to the IRS. Instead, prosecutors claim Tinkoff filed 2 statements to the IRS that reported his income at $206,000, which I'm still struggling. I haven't seen all the details of this case, and I'm still struggling to understand. $206,000, you shouldn't be triggering the income tax component. So I'm not entirely sure when they keep saying his income was being underreported. I mean, certainly you can't underreport your income, but the bigger piece to me is his net worth was $300,000. That's what he said, they claim. Despite owning more than $1 billion in TCS shares, this is his bank, it's a Russian bank, Tinkoff Credit Systems, I believe, through a series of companies registered in the British Virgin Islands. If extradited and convicted, Tinkoff faces up to 6 years in prison. Shares in TCS slid, okay. So this is an online bank, and I guess the story is the bank went public, and instantly he had all these shares that became worth billions. Now, again, I don't know all the details in this case, but I will say that people sometimes ask, hey, Andrew, what if I don't make the money personally, but what if I set up a company somewhere and like my friend owns it, or my dog owns it, or like I own it like under a fake name, like Mr. Boffo or something, and then I won't owe anything, right? listen, they figured this out both in the U.S. and other countries. I mean, if you own it, if you're the beneficial owner, if you're receiving some, if you own a company, if you own shares in a company, you can't just say, oh, it's not my company. Now, obviously, you can help other people run companies. There are certain things you can do, but legally speaking, it's not simply as easy as I'm going to put something in a company, put something in a trust. That may work for asset protection, but it's not that easy for tax purposes. And so that's a separate issue. This is not tax advice, but that is a separate issue. So the issue here is basically that when Mr. Tinkov expatriated, they claim that on, I believe would be his Form 8854, he would say, hey, net worth $300,000. No, I don't have $2 million. No, I haven't paid all the income tax. Here's my assets. Basically saying, again, I'm inferring that, hey, all this stuff I own in the BVI either isn't mine, potentially would be an argument, or simply, hey, this business is worth nothing. Now, certainly you can come up with a business valuation. I mean, if a business is not public, if a business is not, have a standing offer, what is the value of a business? I mean, there are ways to value businesses, but certainly, there's room to discuss that. Now, how do you have a $300,000 net worth when you have shares that shortly after your expatriation are worth billions of dollars? Yeah, that seems tough. And so certainly when you are going through the post-renunciation process of finalizing all your tax affairs, you can work with tax people. We have tax people who go through and say, all right, well, here's how to handle this. I don't see any case where you really make that kind of jump. And that's just asking for trouble. So before you renounce, and in the process of finalizing, the tax piece after you do renounce, you want to have your affairs in order. If you have certain assets, you can gift them. You can do other kind of strategies. Again, you can get certain stuff valued. You can put your whole case together, and then you go out. You say, hey, here's what I have. But you have to tell the truth. I mean, it's just like any other tax return. And I think what people believe is, I can have a company that is probably worth billions of dollars or hundreds of millions or whatever, and I can get a value for that, and then the next day I'm going to renounce, and then suddenly my company is worth 10 or 100 or 1,000 times more. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. Now, again, I don't want to go into all the tax advice. We've had different cases we've worked with some of our U.S. Tax attorneys on. And so there are obviously, things where someone renounces and then later they sell a business, not the next day, but later they sell a business. There was one person that I've worked with where, helped the person on numerous occasions. And every time we talked, the business was worth more. And then finally we talked and he said, well, I've got my offer. We're going to close pretty quickly. There were a couple of small things we could do, but by and large, I mean, when you've got an offer on the table for your business, or I would suppose when your business is about to go public and you have some idea what it's going to be, you can't just set up some shell companies and say, oh, it's not worth anything. My net worth is $300,000. So the real lesson here is, as I always say, better years too early than a day too late. Now, in this case, it's not a matter of waiting for some tax hike. This is within your control. You are controlling your business, right? You're controlling your investments, especially a business. You have control over how it's growing and, what the revenue is and what the valuation of the business is. And so if you believe you're going to build a business that's worth billions or even, millions, then if you believe that you don't want to be in the U.S. tax net, which requires, U.S. citizens, no matter where they live, to pay tax on capital gains, then maybe you want to work on getting that second passport earlier. Now, in this case, I believe Mr. Tinkov was a naturalized U.S. citizen. He had a Russian passport by birth. He didn't need to get a second passport. He could just go back to being Russian. And generally speaking, if you're a billionaire, you're not going to have too many problems traveling around the world, including even coming back to the U.S. Russia-U.S. relations in terms of visas, not exactly easy, but I would imagine you could figure something out. So you can renounce your citizenship if that's the goal earlier, before the value of your company goes through the roof, and people do that all the time. But you can't renounce and then the next day say, oh, well, now it's worth 1,000 times more. And so that's the mistake that a lot of people make, is they wait too long. If you're starting a business that's doing well, if you're making an investment that's going well, and you think it's going to get much bigger, sometimes you have to take that leap of faith, whether you're an American and the ultimate step is that you renounce, or whether you live in any other country and you need to leave that tax system. You need to move out of Australia, move out of Germany, move out of Finland, whatever. And I think it's hard for people because people want to wait until the last minute. And then they went, oh my God, what do I do? My Bitcoin has reached full potential. My business is selling next week. There's not really that much you can do. I mean, there may be some little things. Again, maybe you didn't think about, something. I think in one case we looked at like a Social Security totalization agreement. I mean, there's things you can do, but you want to be planning ahead. Obviously, the other lesson here is you want to play it straight. And I would say the other lesson is sometimes people leave the U.S. I've had people who, let's say, had a green card. They relinquish the green card, they leave, maybe they weren't in full tax compliance, and I say, all right, you should talk to this guy right here, get that straightened out. I've been gone for 10 days, I'm sure it's fine. The IRS and tax authorities, they might take a while to get to you, right? You don't want to, assume that because you filed a form, 3 days later, you're good. You want to file everything properly. So when I'm looking at someone renouncing, we need to get a team of professionals on the tax side, on the filing side, accounting side, on the immigration side, on the foreign side, and make sure that everything is done very properly. Make sure you're reporting things properly. The big issue is waiting until it's too late. And so, if Mr. Tinkoff, now maybe this business shot up like a rocket from nothing to $1 billion very quickly. That happens, in which case, maybe you need to be prepared and get out before you start the business. That's the easiest way to do it. But never wait until it's too late. Never think that. I just don't see a high-profile case like this how they wouldn't see, hey, this guy had 300 grand. The next day he's got $1 billion. Maybe let's look into that. Even if it's a much smaller thing, why would you want to misreport something and get yourself into trouble? That's what I would learn from this case. So people ask, Andrew, how do I get the most out of Nomad Capitalist? How do I begin my Nomad Capitalist journey? The first thing people do is they start right where you're at. They watch YouTube, they listen to podcasts, they read articles at nomadcapitalist.com. We've spent years creating thousands of pieces of free content so that you can get the vibe from someone who's actually done this, from someone who's actually been in your shoes. What they'll do next, they'll get a copy of the book. You can find it on Amazon. It costs a few bucks, and while it's not going to give you all the secrets, it's going to, again, give you more of the vibe. You're going to learn a lot of the things that I've learned. You're going to learn some strategies you can employ, and you're going to get a lot further in your journey. From there, if you are the 7 or 8 figure entrepreneur investor, you can go to nomadcapitalist.com. You can click Become a Client. We're pretty busy these days, but we have availability to help a limited number of people who want to create a holistic plan, something that I think is so important. So if you want to do that, go to nomadcapitalist.com, click Become a Client, learn more about how it works and how we can help you.